cheery beat.
It was upbeat. When the saxophone was going, then I heard the drums, and then I heard what do they call it, maracas. It worked well, didn't it? Like the different instruments. Yeah, it made me smile as soon as I heard it. Yeah.
As if I'm certain that it was used somewhere before, but I don't know. I think the other thing that came to mind was, well, as somebody who's training in jazz drums, like, this is the kind of stuff that I'd be most familiar with. This is the kind of stuff I'm already working towards, so there was a familiarity in that.
I quite liked it. It had quite a nice swing to it. I thought the way the saxophone married with the drums was very nice. Like, the rhythms matched really well, and like the tonality of it went really well, and I feel like you could feel the relationship. You could tell that saxophone player and that person who were playing drums had clearly played a lot of times together in the way they just came together in unison. It was a really nice piece.
This is quite happy stuff, you know. It's not my kind of music, I must say that.
It was alright. I'm not sure how partial I am to the melody myself. Was like very, very fast, very scatty. Well, the first impression that comes to mind is this is music for motion pictures. This seriously is. I have no other way to put it. This is the kind of thing that I used to see. I used to have access to a channel called Tech TV growing up. It was an American channel. And every so often they had some really avant-garde and indie films that had anything from experimental electronic to even free jazz like this. And so that was what it reminded me of. And sometimes like dark, you know, I'd say not thought of, so it was just like you go, like that type of thing.
What can I say? Awful. Sounded more like a jam rather than an actual put together in part of it sounded like a doorbell.
I felt probably the opposite with that one. Wasn't very much rhythm to it. I felt it was quite hard to find some sort of like time signature inside that. There was no like pulse. There seemed to be some sort of woodwind instrument in there that was playing some sort of actual notes, but it kind of felt like when you do a group workshop and there's like one or two people who know how to play instruments, then you give everyone else like a maraca and a shaker and stuff, and you just ask them to, you know, play along. That's it might fit in, say, like if an episode of a TV series and somebody's like in the kitchen but everything's going wrong and they're smashing plates and, you know, flowers going everywhere. If you played that, it would probably fit brilliantly. But in terms of a piece of music to listen to, I probably wouldn't listen to something like that.
And I do immediately see visuals. I do immediately see animated visuals to this. I had ideas, very vivid ideas for what it might look like.
Bit of a mix-up. No gel to it.
No, it means nothing. That nothing at all. It just as I say, it sounds like they're tuning up. I don't know I don't know where they're coming from with that stuff at all. What kind of mood they're trying to set or anything. Yeah, I never like Miles Davis, any of that stuff. You know, trumpets, horrible trumpets with saxes screaming out.
That was very catchy, weren't it? Very. Oh, so I definitely listened to that in the car.
I thought that one was really good. Straight away, that one got me into it. You know, it all seemed to fit together. It had a very nice rhythm and, you know, like beat to it. You could feel the pulse straight away. My head was going.
Bit more jazzy, bit one-dimensional. And what's that synthesizer being played in that? Well, what's that got to do with jazz?
Well, immediately it reminded me of one of my favourite game soundtracks of all time. That of a fighting game called Tekken 4, which was PlayStation 2 era. And I don't say this lightly, because there's a degree of seriousness about it, but there's also a degree of movement behind it, which was very common with that soundtrack and with this person's work. It just immediately brought me back to memories of probably one of the best compilations of music, or original music that I'd heard. That was it. This wouldn't be out of place for me if it were used as a rescore of a Tekken game, honestly.
Funky. Yeah, I like that. It's very upbeat. You know, you can move to it really easy. No messing. You know, it's funky stuff.
It's what they do in warehouses and stuff. Mind-bending stuff. But you have to be mind-bent to go into them places. If I'm in a warehouse, you put that on full blast and be walking out.
You'd have to be nifty on your feet to dance that bit. Wouldn't you?
Very good. Uplifting.
But it reminded me of, you know, then when they used to do I don't know if it was in the 30s. With hands.
Charleston's.
Yeah. So that kind of music.
It was the most jazzy piece, definitely. I thought it had that sense of, I think all jazz needs to have this. It's like, it sounds right and it's all in time, and you know, maybe there's a few off bits, but it's still got like that raw, chaotic kind of sense to it. But there's a lot of musicianship in there, and you can clearly tell that all those musicians know what they're doing, and they kind of know where the other person's gonna go with it. Because I think there was a piano and some strings in there that were playing the same notes and stuff. So if they're improvising, they clearly have quite a good connection with each other. All that we're missing from that was a Scooby-Doo Wop Bop, you know, like a bit of a scat going on.
Well, yeah, that's probably going to be the stuff I'm the most familiar with. The basic swing pattern is something that every jazz drummer is familiar with, every jazz player is familiar with.
Used to be part of Boys Brigade for quite a while. I tried drums, but I could never get used to both hands.
It's all right. I'm not partial, but I'm not impartial to it.
Well, it's too busy. Much too busy. It's like, how many notes can I fit into this? I mean, you get guitarists like that, don't you? You know. So it doesn't do anything for me that way at all. Just it's music that you find in a store or something, I think, like what they call it, music. Music, yeah, that kind of thing.
To actually learning up about the history of it was important to me. Actually learning about the fact that he was Roma. Actually learning about what he had to contend with. For context, I'm half Punjabi, the half is from my father's side, and quarter Tamil and quarter Malayali on my mother's side. So basically, ancestors from two very, very disparate parts of India. A number of people have actually lampshaded this to me and mentioned that they said to me, you know, technically, you're kind of sort of part of the same diaspora, even though you took different routes. If you know, ancestrally, you basically come from the same place, and it's kind of hard to react to that because we're now two separate cultures. I don't know what either one's gonna say about that, you know.
It's like when I go to British sort of like Gujarati Centre and all that. And you know, people say you don't go to them fucking places, you know, being drunk, be rallies, pack this and pack that. You don't fucking realise you say that whole thing. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I use it sometimes, not all the time, but I mean, it's only because they do the same with me, sort of thing. But, so yeah, it's like, some of their music's good, you know.
Whenever I think of somebody who's actively Asian and has done jazz and has made a name for herself, Norah Jones is like the first that comes to mind. And there's so little of a connection because now obviously this isn't every South Asian person, this isn't, but this tends to be my experience of most, both in the diaspora and in the actual place itself. There's more of a fondness for anything that's influenced by the traditional, anything that's Bollywood, anything that's out and out Hindustani music, out and out Carnatic music. To have popular music in the form that we understand it is next to unheard of, to put it mildly. The music that comes out in circles like these is almost universally meant to be for films. They're never separated from each other.
I used to listen to jazz, I think. I could build. Is he jazz? I was listening to him. Is he jazz? He's an actor. He starred in that film with Sigourney Weaver, where he was playing a serial killer.
I've never listened to it. I probably have in the background from somewhere, or it's been on a radio channel, or... I mean, I've never thought about it like as more than just a sound and just music. It's a full spectrum, isn't it? I think, of different music, and you can relate to it. I think it's a varied range of sounds and instruments and things. If that makes sense, I think it change your mood. It's a good mood changer, I think.
I have quite a complex one. I think I always liked it growing up without actually knowing a lot of the context behind it, a lot of the history behind it, a lot of the throat history behind it. When I was training on the piano very, very many years ago, there was no separate syllabus for jazz and classical. They were all lumped into one, whereas now they are separate, but that's besides the point. When I did come across jazz pieces in those days, they were the first thing I felt was that they were a very welcome departure from the rigid nature of most of what I was training. Classical and pre-classical forms tend to be very restrained. I think that restraint certainly did lessen a lot more in the centuries to come, and that restraint was practically gone with jazz. Then, when I became an adult, I finally understood. I was finally away from a place that would suppress a lot of the history behind it. I finally got to learn up about it. I also finally got to understand that jazz, in very many cases, was music of people's culture, people's empowerment, people's rebellion. Jazz being associated with Black America basically also meant that there was an association with change, an association with empowerment that may not have been given by people putting them in employment, or worse, to put it mildly. Also, it got an even better status in my head when jazz was basically banned by Nazi Germany. So, anything that they ban for being degenerate generally is a plus in my book.
But I'm fascinated because it's one type of music, isn't it? But then you've got different versions of it. It's fascinating. I think I'll be starting listening to jazz now. It come across that they don't need to rehearse. You just... And like when you said improvisation, it's quite unique to do that. I'm just amazed by it. Loved it.
Too often when people have an idea of jazz music, they generally think it as music for the elite, music for white tie, white collar people, and I guess that's unfortunately the connotation that it has taken in some circles. Gentrification of art's kind of a general thing that happens. But I'm not one to forget its roots. I'm not one to forget that it was started and is still perpetuated in some cases by those who have been struggling, by those who are poor, and by those who have a lot to say with it.
It's obviously I've not really heard much jazz. I think last only I've heard is like Louis Armstrong and things like that. But yeah, it's different to what I normally listen to, I suppose. But I'm one of these. If it's on radio, I won't turn it off. Especially at weekend, my dad used to listen to a lot of radio. Things like Archers and stuff, and then you'd have music on in between and things like that. So I've listened to a lot of different kinds of music. My dad liked his music. He'd play along with his harmonica. Mum not so much. She was just a bit In fact, it got to a stage with my dad where he took us all out of the house so we could listen to his bloody music. He had a lot better brain than he thought he had because of school and that. I mean, he used to go to a bloody Catholic school with priests and nuns and that. And yeah, so I think only music he ever liked, he turned it off and go on radio, something like gospel. Come to buy out like that. I think that's because it was force fed him, you know. You weren't religious. Same as you just said before, if we'd have known what was going to happen when he died, he'd have told me not to get a bloody priest. He'd told me to piss off.
Music for rebellion has taken very many forms over the years. I think in the past it was hip-hop, then it became rock and punk, and now it's become grime and other subgenres of hip-hop again. What I think, whatever people use, whatever is most commonly used as a means of rebellion winds up becoming the music that defines the spirit of a place. And I guess it's no surprise to me that in a lot of cases grime is the go-to.
It's not something I would necessarily go to directly, because I think jazz is a bit of a swing and a miss. Like, you can have a great track and then a not so great one, and because it is quite improvised and a bit off the cuff, it can be, for me, I think, a bit hit and miss. But I think for other people, that's what they love about it the most, is that, like I was saying, the rawness and the realness of it, and the kind of, you kind of don't know what's going to happen or what to expect next, or you know, how it's all going to just change up. It might change key, it might change time signature or anything, and you know, it all just happens in jazz, doesn't it? Which is like a beautiful thing, especially when, like I say, I think the main part of it is you feel the connection between the musicians, and that's a really important thing, because you know, a lot of bands and stuff, it's easy to go into a studio and all record your bits individually and, you know, play it roughly on stage, but to do that sort of thing live on a daily basis takes real connection, not just, like I say, with the other people you're working with, but the music itself. You know, a true ear for where it's going to go and what you want it to be. In terms of like rapping, there's like videos on YouTube where it'll be a beat, but then it'll have words on the screen, and the words change every couple of bars and stuff. So you kind of just, what I do is I practice that way, because it not only helps you to keep going, but it helps you to think of like different words and different ways to rhyme them. I think the only word to describe improvisation or freestyling anything is like freedom, because that's what it is. It's, you can be and do and say what you want and what you like. As I think the main goal when I do it personally is just keep going, keep flowing, get into that flow state where you're not even really thinking about what you're doing or what you're saying. It's just coming out of you.
I've never heard anyone play. Well, I tell you, there is someone that plays it. Not all the time. You listen to old sporty stars and all that Frank Sinatra music, but then in between you have bits of jazz on. But I used to the bridge on Foul Road, and there's a fellow who's coming out, he used to wear Stetson, and I always thought he was into cowboy music because of the Stetson thing. He was a big jazz fan. He tried to get me to go with him one day to somewhere on Lightfoot Lane. I think it was Lightfoot Lane Church or something. There was some sort of gig on there. But I didn't bother. I suppose he was a bit, I don't know, a bit creepy. A lot older than me. But yeah, it's...
But he was a bit eccentric.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the fellas living near me, I don't know who he is, plays Scottish bagpipe music. You want to hear the noise that makes. Oh, it's frightening. All that to be like neighbours.
So I do feel like me being a jazz drummer, me being enamored by jazz, I've always felt like a cultural vagabond, and me being enamored by jazz kind of highlights that for even further.
Well, it's a funny thing this, because at one time I hated trad jazz. I could build people, I thought, well, what the crap is this, you can't listen to this. And then I went on YouTube and I found this band in New Orleans, and they're a street busking band. I mean, they've been going for years and they've got CDs on, but I'd never heard of them, called Tuba Skinny. And it's all trad, and it's fucking brilliant, honestly. The atmosphere that they get going, they've got about 8 of them in bands, and they're great. They just set up in the street and play, and people are dancing to them and everything. I thought, yeah, it's really good. And that's trad, and I thought I'd never say that I like trad. But I like people, I like some jazz. I like organ, Hammond, organ, Jimmy Smith type stuff. That's the kind of stuff I was brought up on, really. We went to America in '66 and we bought 6 Jimmy Smith albums, and I'd never heard of the guy before, but I just played this one track and I thought, oh, I've got to have this. In '60s, when we were playing, we were doing Liverpool stuff, Beatles stuff, all that, doing it badly because we didn't no idea what chords were or anything. I think we only knew about 3 or 4 chords each. So that were improvisation in a way, weren't it? Yeah. Oh yeah, if you're capable of doing it, you want to, sure, don't you? Same in everything, isn't it? If you've got a really good car and it goes really fast, you want to go fast in it, or a motorbike, or,
The only time I've ever done it like that was because I couldn't let mouth away. I used to play one of them kazoos. Oh dear. I might go home and I've got one of them DAB radios. It has a jazz side on that, I think. I might sing a few, listen to a few. So
I want to put a content warning on my response ahead of time for sexual harassment and sexual assault real quick. Now, improv, initially, growing up was just a case of just trying to think up variations. It was all cerebral. It was all emotional literacy in life as well as in music. These were concepts that were never touched on. And to be honest, I think only a few people get it, and most of us maybe have a surface level understanding of it, but it certainly wasn't a thing where I grew up. What improvisation was completely cerebral, and so I never really understood it, and I think processing my emotions became difficult. Now, one thing that was especially noticed by Greg was that my emotions came forth when I took to the drum. Now, I wasn't exactly thinking about anything. I wasn't exactly thinking about where a certain piece would go, or how it would sound like, or what I was expected to have it sound like. And I guess that lack of expectation and not knowing did help it to a degree. And so at that point, something clicked in me, in the sense that, maybe I need to be in touch with these emotions.
Like I say, I think it captures feelings when you freestyle, and it's less to do with how many syllables got to fit in this space, or what's the melody doing. It's what does it make me feel. But it's like when somebody says to you, what you're thinking about right now, first word that comes in your head. That's what freestyling is, but all the time. The things that are inside your head, more your internal voice than your external, whereas when you write stuff down, it's super easy to overthink and to get into a headspace where it's like, this needs to be this way, or I've done this too much. Whereas when you're going, you're just going. When it's freestyle, it's like, say, freeing. It's like there are no restraints or restrictions. You just go for it. I think jazz is like a big part of that. A lot of jazz musicians, they're very, very, very good and that's why they can do it. Like, I think any form of improvisation is premeditated in itself, in the sense of, I couldn't do a freestyle if I didn't practice rhyming so much, but because my brain automatically can rhyme words to some degree, when I freestyle, it automatically knows where to go, or like, you know, I might not say a word that I want to say, but it'll rhyme, and my brain's doing that on its own, sort of thing. So like, same with like a jazz musician, they'll be playing and they don't necessarily even know what they're playing, but the fingers are just putting them in the correct positions. Have you ever seen a boxer who gets knocked out but they're on the floor and they're still punching in the air? It's because their brain is hardwired to do certain movements under certain circumstances.
A big part of my understanding of mental health, a big part of me getting better, mental health wise, was understanding what emotions did to me, to my body, to my mind, to my thought processes, understanding what they would do to me in life, understanding what they would do to others. And when you have that in life, you carry that, of course, to your music. And so I find that the best kinds of music, whether prepared or improvised, is emotionally literate. And when you're coming from a place of emotional literacy, you have to come from a place of complete vulnerability. And herein lies the problem. When I've needed to be vulnerable, especially on my favorite instrument, especially on the drums, I can't begin to describe the amount of catcalls, the amount of harassment, and worse that I have faced for exercising that fundamental artistic need to be vulnerable. I think a lot of my fears of improvising as a drummer come from the fact that I have not really been in circles where I felt safe.
Well, it was winter and the heater was on in the hallway and there was a big draft coming from the door. So I didn't have anything. I didn't want to ring the council and I didn't want to buy anything for the sake of that. So I improvised and got an old jumper, took the sleeves off, got some filler out of the old quilt that I had, stuffed it and tied the ends with shoelaces, and it worked really well. I don't know, it just came into me, and then I started thinking, well, how can I make something? So I just looked around the house and thought, right, I've got this old thing and this old thing, I just cut them up and just made it. And I was like, wow. Quite pleased with myself, to be honest. And I thought, well, to think on the spot like that, in any different situation, it can work. I always think that there's always a solution to a problem. That's mine. I always have done. I've never been one of them. Well, I never challenged myself to do anything like that. But I think, yeah, I knew probably had it in me, but I was like surprised how quick that in a situation you can think on the spot and think, right, what have I got quick at hand? And I've been using it ever since.
I don't really know if I could limit it a couple of moments, because my entire life is mostly spontaneous. Like, I'm not really good at keeping schedules. I really have the attention span of a goldfish. So when it comes to schedules, it's really only lately that I've even had that sense of rigidity, because everything has been up in the air.
I suppose just being a father, because I never expected to be. It's one of them things, you know. I mean, I didn't know what sex were, basically. I don't like that, you know what I mean? I suppose it just got dropped on me sort of thing. And I always used to say to myself that I'm not going to be like my dad. I don't want my children to see violence. Don't get me wrong, we used to argue a lot. And my ex-partner had a way of just saying, hit me, hit me, hit me. And they even talk about it now, my daughters.
It's a funny one when you think of like times you've improvised in life, because in reality you probably improvise quite a large chunk of it all. You know, like you might go into a meeting about something that you've not necessarily prepared too much for, and you just off the cuff trying to think of what you should have been prepared for in the first place. I love it with like my kids and stuff, when you've got to think of a way to get them to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. I know with my son, who's, you know, getting into like wearing underpants and stuff and doing that overnight, we found it quite easy to get the daytimes done when he'd go for a wee and stuff. But we found that he'd never go for a number 2. And what he'd do is, he'd wait till he was in his bedroom. As soon as you're out of the room, he'd do a number 2, and you know, you'd have to change him, and you know, you're chucking away underpants left, right and centre. It got to a point where, because he was out of nappies pretty much all day, he wouldn't have one on. So if you put a nappy on him, he'd just like strip naked. So we'd have to do things like, you know, talking about improvising, we'd like have to conceal a nappy within his underpants and then like sneak it on him and stuff like that. And you know, the amount of times you have to improvise because they've done a toilet in the middle at night and they've got a nappy on. You're doing pretty much anything you can, pillows under legs, you know, literally whatever you can to get them to go the way you want it to go. But
we had gas and the electric had gone, and thought quick making something for the breakfast in the morning before they went to school. So I just got two slices of bread, put them on the ends of a fork and toasted them in front of the fire and turned them over, and then buttered them and then put jam on, and then that were it. And I thought, wow. I'd say they were about 8, 9. They loved it. They was like, wow, this is better than having it in the toaster, Mum. And then there was melting, like, you know, the chocolate digestives. So like, and then and then marshmallows. So like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you do, don't you? You play Cowboys and Indians and things like that when you were a kid, and you're improvising. Brookfield Park with Wild West, as far as we were concerned, you know. And it were true, yeah. Down on Brook, yeah. Sandhills, yeah. Well, there weren't a lot of kids around when I came from prefabs on Grange Avenue. So there weren't a lot my age. Now my brother, who's 5 years younger than me, there were a lot of kids for him to play with. You know, so by the time I came, I think I was 7 when I moved here. So from 7 till being a teenager, to starting work, you were all playing out on there all the time. I remember my brother had Davy Crockett hat, you know, and a 6-shooter with cap pistol and stuff like that. Yeah.
Just bullshit stuff. I used to have so what kids used to come out in back garden, and Charlotte, because you're a bossy gal, they used to have their own girls group, and I used to encourage them with that. That's probably why she likes music so much now. You know, I bet you went down and knocked on her door like music with full blast. It was funny to watch, you know, and I used to say to her, you're not bad. But then, you know, but yeah, I suppose I've always been one that when shit hits fan, like it used to with ex-partner, with kids and that, I was always the one they come to, because they knew that I'd listen. And
what we do ultimately is trying to adapt to something or other. And We don't really recognize a lot of these little moments of improv because they're just so everyday at this point, and I think we've come to accept something of each other's way of functioning, that these things are inevitable at this point. So I guess that's the best I can say about it. Needing to actually just change plans, needing to actually say, well, we won't go out. Let's just stay home. You're not well. Let me take care of you. Where I've done that for my fiance, or my fiance has done that for me.
It's crazy, and I think, improvisation with kids, it only lasts so long as well, so, you might be trying to get them to eat the broccoli, so you do the aeroplane, eat your broccoli, but then they get to a certain age, and all of a sudden, that bit of improvisation don't work, so you've got to, on your feet, think of something else, or like, maybe they want to dance, so you tell them, if you want to be a dancer, you've got to eat your broccoli, because all dancers are really healthy, and you've got to eat your broccoli, you've got to be on your feet a lot. It really helps to have a good, not to panic in situations, and just to do it, because in reality, I think people in general underestimate themselves and what they're capable of, and it's not till you're pressed into a position where you don't have anything prepared that you prove to yourself that you are capable of doing things that you didn't think you were capable of.
I mean, he bought a big yacht one day about this size. That was just the body. There were no mast or anything on it. You got it from a second-hand shop, and you got it rigged up and everything, and Mum made some sales for it, and we used to take ours and pot a duck pond. I went away with a few friends once, camping, but it weren't like miles away, it was just the country for about 4 days. Yeah, we used to even cook fish we used to catch out at bloody pits and canal and that, different types, like perch and stuff. You'd have a fire, which I used to be good at making anyway, and they used to call me arsonist. And then I'd just have 2 sticks, one at each side of the fire, stick over the top with push fruit fish.
I'd say about 10. And my sister was having a toy sale in the garden. I thought, what can I do? So my mum had some like rose petals and stuff, and she had a beautiful back garden, so I just got these old bottles and put petals in with water, and then put little stoppers on them and sold them. A couple, yeah, the red rose petals ones were, but it never went any further than that. I think improvisation is a really good tool to use in any situation, I think. And knowing that you can do it, it tells you that you can explore. I don't think I've challenged myself enough over years since I was little. I don't think it's never really crossed my mind to do it. But with the impromptu situation like that come up, then you've no choice to challenge yourself, you have to do it. It's a really good tool to have, and I think everybody's got it in them.